you've got to do a really bad job of presidenting and of working with our allies to have two countries their political dynamics totally shift and reject the party that would be your ostensible ally, just because of how negative and aggressive your actions have been. It can't just be a little bad. You got to really f it up. Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. It is Monday, so we are back with editor-at-large of the Bulwark God King, Bill Kristol. What is that, Bill?
I don't get the God King deference and tributes often enough, frankly. So thank you for that. I agree makes you, Sarah, JVL, Sam. They're not really into that stuff. I don't know why.
I can be the one that throws roses at your feet. All right, well, let's just get into it. Jazz Fest is over, so all my revelry is done. I ended with Remy Wolf last night, and so now I'm just back to the dire reality of trying to read Trump's bleats and determine how seriously to take them. You were out with a newsletter this morning that is sort of on this front about Trump's increasing megalomania, about how he wants to be the department store God King of America and the world. Why don't you just kind of summarize the argument that you're making?
I first was going to write about the staff, and I do write about that some. I'm very struck, if I could just begin with that, in the first term, who was bumped in the first month? Mike Flynn. Who was bumped in the first year? Steve Bannon. The crazies were, for a while, marginalized to some degree. I don't want to overstate this. And the normies kind of ran the show for the next 2 or 3 years, more or less, or at least were able to curb Trump, the Kellys and the Mattises and so forth, right? So John Bolton, McMaster. In the second term, it's the opposite. I don't want to make too much of it, but some of it was just personality and idiocy and so forth. But it is interesting, I think, the more I've thought about it, that Waltz was the first one to go. The most normal, probably, least sycophantic, least MAGA, dedicated of the national security team. And I've talked to someone who says, I said, come on, it can't be Steve Miller as national security advisor. And this person who's sort of in touch with MAGA adjacent world said, oh, absolutely, it could be. He's already in effect on the National Security Council. You can see that from that Signalgate chat, right, where Miller weighs in and says, well, I think what the president meant was this, and corrects Vance, incidentally, corrects the vice president. So that's one half of it. Things are worse this second term than the first term because he's surrounded by sycophants and authoritarians, not at least half surrounded by semi-normie accommodators. And things are also worse because he's crazier. I sort of resisted that because I don't like the psychologizing of Trump much. I don't think I'm very good at it. And I feel like it's better just to analyze what he's doing and how he's destroying our democracy and not get into his head too much. But he's clearly more megalomaniacal. It's all gone to his head. Don't you think? I mean, first term, he says in the interview, I think was it The Atlantic, first term I ran the country, but this term I'm running the country and the world. And I don't think there's any irony when he says that,
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I hate we leave the Trump armchair psychologizing on the Bulwark network to George Conway. So I don't know whether or not he's crazier. Here's what I think we can judge objectively, though. He definitely is more reckless about things, right? And that could be because he's gotten more megalomaniacal. Certainly, he was already the top 0.00001% of megalomaniacs in the entire world the first time around. So
right.
could you up that level a little bit? Sure, I guess. Maybe it's because he's more megalomaniacal. I think I took the same about this a little bit over the weekend. I think, though, part of it is he has a lack of care about his political standing. He feels like he already has won. He was worried about being in jail for a minute. Now he won again. Nobody believed him that he could win the first time. Nobody believed he'd win the second time. Nobody was at his second announcement except for brick wall suit. Gates didn't even show up. His kids didn't even show up, right? And so he's like, fuck it. I do think that there's a recklessness about him that when Ashley Parker and Michael Shearer were asking him about, his political standing and whether he's worried about the tariffs and the economy, he definitely just feel like he doesn't really care that much about the normal political ramifications. And I think that does make him much, much more dangerous to the country. Maybe the one silver lining of that is it kind of means that he isn't really thinking about, doing a coup at the end. Because if he was, maybe he'd be more concerned about his political standing. I don't know. Now we're maybe getting a little too deep into the brain, but I think that is objectively true, that he is less concerned about normal political considerations than he was last time, and so less willing to be reined in by people around him, even if there were people around him to rein him in, which there aren't, as you pointed out.
Yeah, I mean, coming back in January 6th, look, he was counted out after that, and he probably thought that deep down, Jesus, maybe I botched this, and I am not going to make it back. And then Kevin McCarthy showed up in Maralago, and everything fell into place. But as you say, it wasn't obvious he was going to crush DeSantis in late 22, early 23. So then the assassination attempt, maybe even psychologically, I've always discounted all the nonsense. I was saved by God, but who knows what he thinks, right? I mean, I don't think he believes in God in a conventional way, but he could believe in his own fate, fated dominance and destruction of the American political system.
His own godlike, whatever traits.
And the way I said it in the piece, I'm not sure it's an accurate use of the terms. It probably isn't. That he'd gone from being a narcissist in the first term to a megalomaniac. Now, I don't know if that's quite right, that distinction, but I was just trying to capture somehow the notion that it's gone to another level. And I do think that's true. It does make him more reckless. It also makes him interested in things in Canada, Panama, and Greenland, right? The territorial expansion stuff. He didn't have anything about that in the first term. He wanted to get reelected and do a lot of, corrupt stuff and get even wealthier and so forth. Now he still wants to do all that, of course. But even on that, the scale of it is so much more ambitious and so much crazier that it is more reckless also, I suppose. But on the territorial expansion, it's as if he does have in his head, gee, if you want to be like a world historical figure, you need to increase the size of your empire. That's kind of what it means to be, So I think it really leads to recklessness. I think it's bad on the whole. Very bad, honestly. And I think even in terms of the coup at the end, it could just lead him to really prepare for the coup instead of doing it in a somewhat, thank God, haphazard and slapdash way in those last 3 months. So in that respect, I don't know that he really believes there should be an election in 2028 in which he or his anointed successor should lose power. He's not behaving like a guy who thinks that, fine, if I lose power, I lose power,
All right, 7 minutes in on a Monday. We're really doing the Bulwark thing today, Bill. Okay. Well, how about we go back to the military parade? On Friday, after we taped, the Army confirmed there will be a military parade on Trump's birthday as part of the celebrations around the Army's 250th birthday. Plans for the parade call for about 6,000 soldiers, 150 vehicles, and 50 helicopters to follow a route from Arlington to the National Mall. Officials say it will cost tens of millions of dollars. Trump was asked about this directly with Meet the Press over the weekend, and he's in. We're doing it. We're going to do the Kim Jong-un thing. Obviously, this is in line with your megalomaniac thesis.
The Army had planned for a rather modest sort of demonstration of some equipment and some tributes to soldiers and veterans and so forth on the Mall on June 14th, which is the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. It also happens to be Trump's birthday, and Trump, seeing, I think, for him, more importantly, that it was his birthday as well, had decided to go for the huge parade with him up there in the reviewing stand. And I don't know the history of this entirely. I could be wrong. I have the impression, certainly, military parades are pretty rare in the U.S., and they tend to happen after a military victory. The only one I've seen was the one after the first Gulf War in 1991, and that was even a fairly modest thing. And there was even then at the time, should we be doing this? But I think for the first President Bush thought, we've got to shake the Vietnam syndrome so we can be proud that we won this one in early 1991. And so there was a modest parade down Pennsylvania Avenue. So this parade is, this is not something that normally, and there have been parades obviously after World War II and so forth, but this is not the kind of thing that normally happens. And from Arlington, for people who don't know Washington geography, all the way over to the White House, that's much longer than the inaugural parade or anything like that. And the tanks, it's going to be grotesque, and Trump will be there. And I bet the rhetoric by June 14th will be more about Trump's birthday and less about the U.S. Army's birthday.
Yeah, well, We also haven't won any wars. I mean, he's actually currently surrendering in a war. I mean, I was a little child, so I do not remember the national victory celebration in 1991 that you.
It was
you
modern. I mean, that's
there.
the point. It wasn't, even if you hadn't been a little child, it was forgettable. And to Bush's credit, he sort of wanted to do it because he sort of wanted to show we weren't suffering from the Vietnam syndrome anymore. But it was not a big thing.
Yeah. Previously to that, it looks like 1946 New York City Victory Parade. I don't know. Trump was maybe impressionable since he's 100 years old. He might have remembered that one. The point, I think, the whole thing is kind of grotesque and is not. I definitely feels more authoritarian than American. But to this point, just about how it is not like in a result of some celebration of military success, like it's centrally about him. Right. Like, I mean, this is like, even if they try to position it as as an army celebration, like it is centrally about like him overseeing, the power and the might and, trying to, menace foes and maybe menace, who knows, maybe menace Greenland, who he volunteered over the weekend that he does not want to rule out military conquest over. And like that element of it. And, I mean, like the branding side, like that is how the Trump brain works, right? That is what this is. It's about a Trump USA branding exercise.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of it until we were just talking this point I'm about to make, which follows on your point, which is if one wanted to do this and when we're a somewhat devious politician with a big ego, which God knows there are plenty of, and you sort of like to have a parade that you got to preside over and kind of coincides with your birthday, that's kind of nice. You would arrange for the Army or for Pete Hegseth, with the Secretary of the Army who works on Hegseth, to recommend this parade for the 250th anniversary, and then you would sign off on it because the Army wants it and the Defense Department wants it, right? Trump isn't disguising the fact that it's his idea. I think, in fact, he's sort of boasting about it, right? And this is sort of I'm the guy who's responsible for this parade. That's the way he talks about it, which again just emphasizes your point that there's not even a pretense that this is a kind of genuine thing that the Army would be doing. It's all about Trump.
Yeah, no subtext, no pretense with Trump ever. We also had the discussion about rebuilding and opening Alcatraz last night, which is also clearly a branding exercise. For those, we have some foreign listeners to the podcast. So for those who are not familiar with Alcatraz, I do want to offer briefly this audio from the great Phil Hartman as Alcatraz tour guide Vicky.
This is the main cell block area, home to such famous criminals as Al Capone, Mickey Cohen, Joseph Dutch Fritzer, and Robert Stroud, the famous Birdman of Alcatraz.
I saved some of our listeners from the section where he discusses what happened to people's ocular cavities in Alcatraz. So we'll just leave that for the people that know. But what do you think? Is it a sign of a great society in the golden age where like most of the focus of the government is on the expansion of prisons domestically and foreign?
It's ridiculous. It's been a museum for I've never been, but did you ever go when you were out there? You lived out in the Bay Area.
I never went.
I looked at it you can sort of see it from some of those nice buildings in the Presidio, right? And stuff. I mean, I'm
not a prison man.
I know. I'm not
either. Excited about
I
prisons. I don't. It's just not my vibe.
But I mean, all I'm saying is I don't know how long it's been a museum, but it's like forever in my adult lifetime. I don't believe it's been. I think it was closed in the 60s or 70s or something as a prison. So just it's all insane. Let's spend a fortune to rehab this thing into a prison so we can helicopter the people out there or take them out there on a boat for what? That our prisons aren't secure enough elsewhere. I mean, it's all crazy, obviously. But he saw movies about Alcatraz when he was a kid. Very Trump-like, right? And it was a thing kind of in the 50s and 60s, Alcatraz, the stories about it, the impregnable place you couldn't escape from. And he just likes that idea. More prisons, bigger walls. That's what Trump's all about.
It is. I mean, it's like, how seriously do you take this stuff? But it is noteworthy, right? Like this is where the focus is. Like we're building this massive prison outside of San Salvador. He wants him to expand it. We want to rebuild our most famous prison here and reopen it, right? Meanwhile, there might be a little pain for small businesses, and kids might have to have fewer dolls and pencils. They will. I mean, like the whole thing put together, and we're going to have a military parade. Like, I mean, you tie it all together, and it is the picture of, I keep coming back to Libya because I feel like Gaddafi is my most, I think, acute comparison right now to Trump, because Gaddafi was also very interested in the costuming and, the branding. And it feels like a tin pot dictatorship where we're focusing on expanding our prisons. Possibly we're going to have to tighten the belt a little bit on the economy, but we are going to have big ostentatious parades to celebrate the leader.
Yeah, totally. And even the tariff stuff, I mean, it is a kind of autarky, if you want, we're going to not depend on these other countries. All the movies are going to be made here. That's sort of a piece with it too, don't you think? It's not quite the brutal side of it, but it's the kind of self-obsessed and insanely nativist side of it.
I mean, he also wants to tariff foreign movies. It's unintelligible. Sonny Bunch wrote about it in the newsletter this morning. If people want to read about it, I've gotten a couple texts from Hollywood folks. So obviously Hollywood folks are panicked because it's like, what does this cover? Does it cover movies that have multi-shoots but he doesn't know or care or think.
Yeah,
it's about branding. It's about Hollywood should tape in Hollywood.
That's the reason goods are tariff, not, intellectual property usually. I mean, how would you even do the tariff and all that? Incidentally, if anyone cares, and it's not worth getting into, as you say, because it's so idiotic, it's a huge net plus for us, needless to say, films and movies and associated, TV shows. It's like we export them to the rest of the world, as one knows if one ever travels and finds all these people who've watched all these American things. And everyone else is offering incentives to film stuff elsewhere to catch up with us. But even there, those incentives end up helping, American actors and American, cameramen and so forth. I mean, it's not even worth getting into, as I said, but it's utterly insane. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like how it's like the other countries are offering incentives, and so we're going to tariff. We're not for tariffs. Like, right. I don't know if you understand really how incentives work, but you did bankrupt a casino, so that makes sense. Our old friend Karl Rove was on Fox last night, and I got to tell you, Turd Blossom was cooking. He was cooking on Fox News last night so much that I need to play a highlight reel. Let's listen.
Tweeting out a picture of you as the Pope is deeply offensive to a great many people. Going out there and saying, for example, this guy from Maryland, I don't know whether he's a good guy or a bad guy. I don't know if he's a gang member or not. But the fact is bring him back to the United States, lay out the facts in a court of law, and get it done. I thought it was really problematic when he said, well, you know what? The kids, those little girls at Christmas, they don't need $30. They can do it too. And if they have to pay a couple more bucks for them, okay. Well, it sounds like Mr. Scrooge. And the ordinary American is like, wait a minute, I thought you were on my side. The president is, saying gas is $1.90. I just filled up my tank. It ain't $1.90. And we do not have inflation tapped down to 2%, and we run the risk of having it jump up at least in a one-time way if these tariffs are put in place.
Welcome to the resistance, Karl Rove. I've tried to get him on the Bulwark podcast. He's welcome anytime. Doors open, Karl. You're sounding familiar. I don't know, Bill. What do you think?
I mean, Karl's pretty careful to try to stay in the center of the party and well plugged in with everyone he wants to be plugged in with. So I'd say, what do you think where would we characterize him as being most of the Trump years? Trump adjacent, acquiescent, excusing of Trump, in the normie camp that's willing to vote for Trump and defend Trump, the John Thune camp.
Yeah, I actually don't know if he voted for Trump.
Yeah, I don't. Well, maybe he didn't.
Maybe even a little closer to the Paul Ryan
Okay,
version.
He certainly never said he didn't. I don't believe he ever said he didn't, though, and he certainly didn't.
I don't think so.
Wasn't there at those Republicans
16,
for Harris
I don't
events,
think so.
But anyway, I mean, I'll just pay Karl the respect of saying he'll only say what he believes here, and he's thought about it. But I also believe it must show the people he's talking to, the Karl Rove circles, are edging away from some aspects of Trump.
The Tom Tillises of the world. I mean, because this is like when Karl and I were on a panel together a couple months ago. We were kind of arguing about the Tom Tillises, right? Like you could tell, like that is really where he's trying to, like where he is positioning himself. It's the senators he still talks to, and it's the ones that I think he genuinely thinks like want what he thinks ideologically for the country would be the best, policies, et cetera. But it's just like these guys don't act. these guys have to act way more Trumpy than they really are, right? And so I do think that like him speaking out is maybe a signal that that is where all those guys' heads are at, and we're trying to nudge. Maybe Carl's just fucking annoyed and done with it. I don't know. Who knows? Who needs to psychoanalyze? But it's not really a great sign that you're 3 months in and you're at Fox primetime and you got that's Trey Gowdy with Karl, and they're just like running down the list of all of Trump's obvious mistakes, and it's like it's pretty blunt. And it doesn't sound hair on fire. It's not like besides the Pope situation, it's not really obsessing over like random tweets. Like it's like here are the fundamentals of the politics and policy that you're screwing up right now.
Right.
So anyway, Karl, we'll keep an eye on it.
He should come on. I can't believe he hasn't been on the podcast.
I know, me neither. Come on, Karl. Water's warm. It can't be.
I'll email him and tell him not to come on, and then he'll probably do it.
Then he'll come on. Okay. Mostly don't bite. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I'm a therapy man. I was just doing a little therapy talk, a little midlife crisis therapy talk with one of my buddies over the weekend, who was in town for Jazz Fest, and I've been on a break from my therapist, but he was considering whether it's something he should look into, and I was just discussing all of the value that I got out of it and the way in which, as a patient, you want to ensure that you're getting therapy that serves you, and getting therapy that serves your needs is something that is useful for you. And there are ways to do that. It can be a little intimidating, but there are ways to do that. And one of the ways is by using our new sponsor, BetterHelp. Mental health awareness is growing, but there's still progress to be made. 26% of Americans who participated in a recent survey say they've avoided seeking mental health support due to fear of judgment. When people hesitate to get help, it doesn't just affect them. It impacts families, workplaces, and entire communities. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching people with the right therapist from their diverse network of more than 30,000 licensed therapists with a wide range of specialties. BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable and convenient. Convenient is important. Serving over 5 million people worldwide. We are all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/thebulwark to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/thebulwark. I want to go back to your comment earlier because I don't want to get lost on Stephen Miller as National Security Advisor. Let's think about that in the context of I'm breaking a rule. Trigger warning, Trump's voice is coming. Very briefly, I want to play Trump talking to Kristen Welker about the situation in the Russia-Ukraine war.
Are you any closer to reaching a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia?
I hope so.
How would you characterize
it? I do believe we're closer with one party and maybe not as close with the other, but we'll have to see. I'd like to not say which one we're closer to, but we did do a deal for the American people that was good. We were able to get rare earth. The Europeans are getting paid back. They have a loan. We didn't. Biden just gave them $350 billion. He has no idea where the money is, what happened. And at least we'll, in one form or another, get our, I don't feel so foolish.
So, boy, let's just dissect that a little bit. So we do have a deal with Ukraine where we are taking a ransom back for helping them. So we've got that done, the rare earth. We've got our bounty. But we're trying to do a peace deal. There's one of the parties, it's a secret, which is not playing ball as much. It sure seems like he's talking about Russia there, right? Because he just did the deal with Ukraine, but he can't criticize Putin. Never can criticize Putin as the junior partner in the relationship. And it doesn't seem like there's really any evidence there that, like, because Putin isn't going along with the peace deal, that's going to change his attitude towards Ukraine, because he goes on to continue insulting Ukraine and talking about how we wasted money there. So I tie that into the Stephen Miller as National Security Advisor and Mike Waltz, whatever you think of him, as a quasi-traditional Republican being pushed out over to the UN. And it's like, I don't see much hope here. Right? I basically analyze that Trump is pivoting more towards the nationalists, and that he's annoyed that Putin is not doing, his buddy Putin isn't doing what he wished. But that's not going to actually change the policy towards being tougher against Russia. Do you interpret it any differently than that?
No, I very much agree with that. This deal he's done with Ukraine, I don't really understand it. I mean, there's no money right now. We have rights for the future. I mean, that may be okay or not. It's obviously done under huge pressure of the Ukrainians. It's also not clear that we'll exercise those rights, or we won't forgive them later on, or they will, and the next president may not want to take advantage, be the president of a country that's taking advantage of Ukraine when it most needed help. No, but I am not optimistic about Trump helping Ukraine, which I think is the key. The key is there going to be aid for Ukraine this fiscal year? That's the question. And secondly, will we continue what we're doing a little bit behind the scenes, some of the intelligence sharing and other stuff? The second, I can't judge. Maybe Trump doesn't focus on it, and there are decent people in the intelligence community and the Defense Department to keep on doing it, and Hegseth doesn't stop it. Maybe. But really, is there going to be aid? And that's something where the Republicans in Congress, some of whom still sound pro-Ukraine, need to actually act. There's going to be actual appropriations bills, or an omnibus, or a CR, something. Congress is going to appropriate money at some point in the next 4 or 5 months, and there are going to be a bunch of items in this appropriations bill for everything from border security to obviously to Medicaid and everything else. And one of those items could be military support for Ukraine, or it could not be. I don't believe Trump would veto the bill over that. If he did, you might be able to override it. So will the Tom Tillises of the world, and the Wickers of the world, and the McCalls of the world, and the Mike Turners, there are certainly plenty to get it done. Half the Republicans on the Hill voted for aid for Ukraine a year ago. If half of those go for it, almost all the Democrats will be for it. It'll easily pass as an amendment to whatever appropriations bill is up. So for me, that's the question. And will Trump really fight against it? Or maybe he will take kind of a hands-off attitude, but I don't know. I think that with Vance and those people, unfortunately, I'm pessimistic.
I'm pessimistic too. Maybe the intelligence sharing. It does seem like there's maybe some momentum for Trump's face save here is, you put on some more sanctions on Russia. How much more can we really do? I mean, we're already close to maxing that out, but there's some sort of Russia sanction element to it that, makes it feel like we aren't abandoning Ukraine as we do, essentially. Kind of feels like a most likely outcome to me. To the Hill point, this was last week. I don't think we got a chance to talk about it. James Lankford was on the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You see this? No. And he was asked if he needs to reconsider the lockstep support for Trump's agenda. Lankford, the senator from Oklahoma that had worked with Democrats on that immigration deal, so has shown some openness to working with Democrats on deals, he said, there's two ways to do checks and balances. One is to do press conferences, and the other one is to go privately to people. You'll find a lot of Republicans go to administration officials behind the scenes. When nobody's looking, we're doing the right thing. But that's a pretty discouraging posture from the type of person that you would need to do this. And I do think that Democrats, a useful thing that Democratic senators could do that they felt a little bit shy about for whatever reason, interpersonal, other deals, is actually pressuring these guys to join them, or even you could do it cheekily and nicely, but just I would love to work with James Lankford on this, right? But do it in a way that forces them out of their bunker a little bit, to the extent that's possible. I don't know what you make of any of that.
No, totally agree. One thing on the administration, incidentally, I guess 3 months ago, when the German elections were happening, Elon Musk was wildly pro AfD, the neo-Nazi party, or at least anti-Nazi party, if you want to be nicer to them, but certainly elements of neo-Nazi types in there, and very right-wing, obviously pro-Russian, pro-Putin, et cetera, party. And Vance was also explicitly. The others stayed out of it, as far as I can recall, in terms of they endorsed. It's unbelievable. The U.S. Vice President endorsing the neo-Nazi party, following Musk. But I sort of thought, well, maybe that's Musk. Vance has his own hobby horse. We know that from the Signalgate text. Also, he hates the democratic European states, nations. But I was very struck this week that Vance reiterated his support of the AfD, and Rubio jumped on board. Did you see that? Rubio couldn't resist tweeting. So he's now both Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. And just to show that he's fully on board, that he doesn't have a shred of decency or dignity left, he retweets this praise. It was Musk, I guess, who originally praised it as centrist. A centrist party. You can't believe that I think the German government had done something to investigate some terror links and foreign, I think, Putin links for in the AfD. And this is being denounced as, an attack on I don't know what, freedom in Germany. And so Rubio joined in the attack. Rubio's really your man.
I did see this.
Your man Rubio has not really been really a pillar of strength. I'm just going to say,
my man.
I
I don't know. We'll have to go back to the 2015 archives to see who was on the.
That was what's that called when Trump does that all the time? Projection. That was like
projection.
Me projecting onto you.
I'm happy you brought this up because the Rubio attack on Germany, on the German government, was about how they are targeting the political foes here, AfD, with this investigation, and how that is just totally unacceptable, authoritarianism, statism, European. And it's just like, meanwhile, it is Rubio who is the point person on going after people in this country on visas,
right,
and taking away their visas and deporting them and jailing them. I mean, some of them have been now detained, even though they're no danger, for months. I mean, there's the Mahmoud Khalil who they wouldn't even let out for the birth of his child, which is like crazy. It's not like this person is a murderer. Like whatever you think about his political views, it's insane. He's in a detention center, and he can't go be with his wife and child when they're born. That's Rubio doing that. Like, that is our government directly targeting people for being opposed, I guess, politically to their position with regards to Israel. And so like the whole thing is just like preposterous.
Right. Yeah, Rubio's doing that chest beating, right? I'm personally going after these lunatics who are coming to our country, and what? And co-signing an op-ed that was critical of Israel's policy in Gaza. That was the case, I think, with that one woman in
Ozturk,
in Tufts. Yeah.
Just a few other items out here in the news worth mentioning. Enrique Tarrio, former leader of the Proud Boys, got a chance to personally thank Trump on Saturday night for issuing the pardon that cut short his 22-year prison term that he was serving in connection with his organizational efforts around January 6th. Tarrio came with his mother, I guess. They got invited to Maralago, and you got to go up to Trump and congratulate him, thank him. I'm trying to think about like parallels where you have like basically, kind of a rogue militia outfit that was acting in support of a political leader. The leader of that militia gets jailed for their violent efforts. The political leader then pardons him, and then has a meeting with him where they can congratulate each other. It's like it is something that would be happening in a Turkey or a Libya, right? Like, this is not what would even be a parallel to this in our country?
I mean, probably in 1882, some Southern governor pardoned a KKK leader who had killed newly freed black men in the South, and then met with him. Right? I mean, it's probably such an instance, but it's like that. It's horrifying. And the January 6th stuff. I was talking about the self-radicalization of Trump. You see it so clearly on the January 6th thing, where at least he knows on January 7th, you sort of have to pretend I didn't want the violence. 2-3 years later, he's defending them, promising to pardon them. And then I come back that first day, we all screamed and yelled about it, but it's sort of disappeared, obviously, with all these other things that have been happening. The pardon of all of them, the blanket pardon of all of the January 6th people, and no ifs, ands, or buts, very indicative of where Trump's head was for this second term. And I do think that was a case where some of the White House counsel's office were saying, let's go through them. Maybe there's some of them we should just have a little more limited clemency and stuff. And it was basically, I think Trump was quoted at the time and saying, let's just pull the Band-Aid off and let's do all of them. And you know what? He probably thinks, I didn't pay any price for that. That hasn't come up a heck of a lot. And now let's see if he pays the price. He won't pay any price for this meeting, I suppose, down at Maralago with this Proud Boys guy who was one of the main organizers of it. I mean, the other point that going forward, though, that is more serious is, again, the signal this is sending for the possibilities of vigilantism on behalf of Trump, on behalf of his policies, on behalf of those against those he hates, and helping those he, as the KKK analogy, helping those he wouldn't mind having intimidate some of his enemies. And again, in the run up to 2026, but especially the 2028 election, I think that part Trump has a certain lizard brain cunning about why some people might say you shouldn't be seen with this guy. And Trump in the back of his mind kind of knows, you know what, I may need these guys at different moments if there really is a serious opposition to some of the stuff I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and we're also on that point, the government has reached a settlement with Ashley Babbitt, who was killed that day, who's trying to storm through the windows in the Capitol. So there's not even just a pardon, but like we're now paying out the people that were targeting the Capitol. I wonder if that will continue as well with other folks as they have lawsuits against the government, et cetera. Y'all, parents know the hustle is real. With work, kids, errands, and everything in between, there's rarely time to slow down, let alone figure out a 10-step skincare routine. But no matter how busy life gets, your skin still deserves more than just the basics. That's why I've been using today's sponsor, OneSkin. Their products are true multitaskers. They hydrate, protect, and support your skin's long-term health. And it's all thanks to their OS1 peptide. It targets cells that accelerate the visible signs of aging, like wrinkles, thinning skin, and a dry, dull complexion. OneSkin supports the skin at a deeper level, so even if you're running on fumes, your skin can get what it needs. You can try their cleanser, moisturizers, sunscreens, or their new peptide scalp serum, and get 15% off with code BULWARK at oneskin.co. For parents who do it all, now there's a skincare routine that does it all. We're mentioning parents because we're coming up on Mother's Day and Father's Day. And, Mother's Day's first. Mother's Day's right around the corner. My mom's birthday and Mother's Day are always a couple of days from each other, which feels like a burden for me. I know everybody feels really bad about me, but having to do two gifts at once, it's a challenge. And, my mother is pretty well suited when it comes to moisturizing creams, as you might imagine. But maybe your mother isn't. Moms are different. And I guarantee you your dad's different. So if you got a father out there, Father's Day in the future, you can check that off while you figure out your Mother's Day plans. Either way, send them a little bit of moisturizing cream. The straight dads, they need it. Some of the moms, they're gonna enjoy trying something different. Who, even if they do already have moisturizers, who doesn't like a bunch of different ones to try? Try it out. Try out the one with the OS1 peptide. You should do it. OneSkin was founded in 2016 by an all-woman team of scientists with PhDs in skin regeneration, stem cell biology, immunology, and bioinformatics. OneSkin's entire R&D process is run in-house, strictly adhering to the rigor of the scientific process from start to finish. We still do science in this country. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin with 15% off using code BULWARK at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code BULWARK. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Give your skin the scientifically proven gentle care it deserves with OneSkin. I wanted to go to the other side of the aisle real quick, and Jonathan Cohn has a piece out. He's our newest policy man who's living in Michigan, so he kind of did a deep dive on Whitmer, kind of the context around her meeting with Trump and the event that they had in Michigan, where they got the news, or the squadron was not canceled that existed in the state. And I don't know, we got to talk about this quite a bit on the next level, so I don't really need to belabor the point, but I guess I'm curious what you made of sort of the context around what happened with Whitmer and what you think a good posture should be for Dem governors right now.
Yeah, I discussed it with Jonathan a little on the podcast I did yesterday, the Sunday Bulwark, and it was mostly about RFK Jr., who's very bad. And I actually learned a lot about how dangerous and damaging Trump administration health policies are, which Jonathan knows a ton about that. But he did write this interesting piece about Whitmer. he was being fair and balanced, as we used to say in Fox days. I'm a little unsympathetic to Whitmer. I mean, there are ways
You're unfair and unbalanced.
Yeah, I've always been more on the unfair and unbalanced side. And I don't know. I admire Janet Mills telling Trump to go, so that they'll see, he'll see her in court if he tries to pull Maine's money, federal education money, because they don't like Maine state laws on transgender youth. And I think maybe if I read that the administration sort of gave in to Maine a little bit on that. So maybe confrontation doesn't always fail. Again, look, they're governors. To be fair, they have real citizens, real constituents. They can't simply pick fights. Well, they could, but they probably don't think it's wise. And I don't begrudge them that. It's a little different from the law firms. I don't think they really are. They're watching out for their own profits, frankly, right? Or maybe if you want to be nice, they're clients, but they're not watching out for the public interest. She is watching out for the public interest in Michigan, at least in part. But I still think, I don't know, I'm still more on the Janet Mills side. What about you?
Yeah, no, it's a massive thumbs down for me. I don't even really actually buy the argument that she needed to do this to protect the squadron. Who knows? I guess there's this all counterfactual, but you couldn't send the lieutenant governor. You couldn't. Was there not? I certainly, you could sell me on the fact that it did not, that in the midst of this kind of inflection point, it did not make sense for her to go full JB Pritzker and start poking her finger in his eye. And maybe it made sense to not do that for 6 weeks or 2 months or whatever, and nobody would have noticed, frankly. So nobody would have talked about it. But to go welcome him on the tarmac, have a hug. The whole thing is just sick to me. And I go back to JVL wrote a pretty provocative piece, as he is meant to, as he's known to sometimes. I think it was right after the election, I believe. And he wrote that the Dems need their own DeSantis. The Dems need a governor that will really just be an aggressive opponent to the president and do things to troll them and kind of reject the policies that are put in place and really go to the mat at every possible opportunity to argue and counterbalance towards what was happening out of Washington, since Dems had no power in Washington. And I thought that was basically right. I think that the courts are going to be protecting the states' rights. This was one area where the Supreme Court is would probably be pretty sympathetic, despite their lean to kind of a federalist style argument, since that's where all of the 6 majority Republican judges come out of that sort of background, that schooling. So I don't know. I think that's the right thing to do. Pritzker's kind of doing it. I don't really see anybody doing it with as great effect as DeSantis did. Now, it didn't pay off for DeSantis in the end, obviously, but I do think there was something to be said for more aggressive confrontation from the states, and I think that a lot of the concerns about the Trump targeting the states has been a lot of empty threats, and we'll see what actually happens.
Yeah, it's mixed up with the whole question of, should the Democrats be more centrist? Should they be more, outspoken? And they kind of get melded together, right? Being nice to Trump sort of equals reaching out to Trump voters, which sort of equals not being too lefty on a bunch of issues. And I think that a lot of these are not really, it's a false conflation of all these things. But I get the impression that that's paralyzing some of these governors. I was thinking about, just as you saw, so Wes Moore, whom you've had on the show and whom I think you and I both respect and like. It's Van Hollen went to, I guess maybe it was appropriate. He's the federal officer, the senator. He's the one who flew to El Salvador. But of course, Wes Moore is actually the governor of that state, right? In which Mr. Garcia was resident. So maybe he could have done a little more. But there's a lot of triangulation going on. And the main thing to be said, A, I'm sort of against it anyway. And B, it doesn't matter. It's not going to work. No one's going to remember you 3 years from now when you're running for president in 2028 for what you said in 2025. And honestly, just as a matter of real civic duty, Trump has to be taken on at all these things. And I do think it sends a bad signal to people who aren't certain whether, I don't want to blame Gretchen Whitmer for this exactly, but if you're a business type who's wondering, should I risk a little bit with my shareholders or employees by taking on Trump? If you're a law firm, if the political leadership of the opposition party won't do it, it's bad. It's bad when the political leadership of his own party won't do it. We're already paying a huge price. If the political leadership of the opposition party won't do it, then I think if you're a CEO in the Midwest, if you're a CEO in Michigan, or auto company, auto parts, you think, oh, God, I mean, Whitmer's not taking them out. I'm not going to. So I do think it does some damage. Don't you think?
I totally agree with that. And I couldn't agree more also with the hubris of like thinking that the exact wording of your op-ed is gonna resonate 3 years from now. And this is just like total political consultant brain. People that are not listening to podcasts like this do not even know what was in Gretchen Whitmer's speech. Like, frankly, the hugging of Trump is much riskier than like going, fighting for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Sure, is there something you could do in 2025 that could harm you in 2028? Like, saying that you're for, the abolishment of the prison state or whatever, or like that you want to replace all the police officers with, with just kind of nice people with batons that do, mental health services. Like, sure. Like, you could take like positions that are so insane that like somebody could remember it, but like anything within the 30s, like people just are not paying that close of attention to you right now, except for insiders. And so do the right thing and argue passionately for the right thing and see what influence you can have. I think that's obvious, and there's way too much overthinking of it. I'm going to close with a little bit of good news. I don't want to pretend to be an expert on this, but it happened. Australia's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is from the Labour Party down there, the center-left party, secured a second term. It was a very kind of similar path to Canada. They have blessedly short elections there. It was a 5-week election, but so it happened kind of right in the shadow of the Liberation Day. And in Australia, they thought that the Conservative Party was going to potentially win or do much better. Ended up going the other direction. They're called the Conservative Party is called the Liberal Party down there. So the Liberal Party leader, Dutton, lost his seat, just like just like Pierre Poilievre lost his seat, the Conservative Party leader in Canada. So it is, pretty noteworthy and not doing us a lot of good, but intriguing that Donald Trump is like tanking the political prospects of conservative leaders across the Anglosphere.
I mean, God knows I don't know expert in Australia. I've been a couple of times. I do their TV and radio stuff occasionally. I know somehow I got when Murdoch owned the Weekly Standard, I was like, had a vague connection to Australia, so I'm still on their list or something. And I am always struck how much they know about and how closely they follow American politics. I mean, that's generally the case around the world. We are, we don't follow anyone's politics, and I don't much either. I'm embarrassed to say I should, but we are a very big country, big player in their world. And so people will say, well, are you kidding? And Canada is one thing; it's right across the border. But Australia, were they paying attention? They were. And being which when Trump launches the tariffs and does other things that call into question his commitment to our traditional alliances, and Australia is a close ally, and Australia's paid a price for sticking with us and being anti-China because they are much closer to China, and their trade with China has suffered some, and they're always being bullied and badgered by China, et cetera. They follow this, and I do think, therefore, it is sort of interesting and. I guess it's encouraging. It's encouraging that Australia wants to do the right thing, and that other Australian people want to stand up for, against countries like China and stand up against authoritarianism. I don't know if it's encouraging for us, and it's encouraging for the world if these other for our allies can sort of fend for a while without us being on their side. I still worry that it's an awful lot to ask of the Australias and Canadas of the world for them to hang tough when we're going in the wrong direction.
It is a lot to ask, but it is encouraging that they're doing it. It's interesting. I forget. There was a Dem economist. It might have been on one of your conversations. It might have been Furman or Summers, but I forget where I heard it. But one of the prominent Dem economists was saying, there's a way that you could, in theory, do a trade war with China, right? That could be more effective, but the anti of that is getting the Australians on board and the Canadians on board and right and
Europe.
like and Europe.
Yeah,
right?
you're super
and,
close. That's what the TPP was supposed to be, incidentally, which they all walked away from in 2015, but 16. But that you tighten the alliance, and then they are willing to say, okay, we're all really tight. We're all trading. We're all defending each other. We can afford to join you in standing up a little more to China. We've done the opposite, of course.
Yeah, we've done the opposite, and it is noteworthy that this trade war is happening in the context with these other countries, our close allies, feel so alienated, that they are that there is real political action in their country, like in negative response to what we're doing. So I mean, you got to. I've been saying this about the Dallas Mavericks GM Nico Harrison. You got to fuck up really badly to have to do something, which in his case was trade Luka Doncic, and then have people come to your office the next day with signs like calling for your head. Like, you've had a bad day at the office if you make a decision, and the next day people come call for your head, and that's like really Trump. Like, you've got to do a really bad job of presidenting and of working with our allies to have two countries like their political dynamics totally shift and reject the party that would be your ostensible ally, like just because of how negative and aggressive your actions have been. Like that, like it can't just be like a little bad. You got to really fuck it up for that to happen. So anyway, kudos to the Aussies. A little less good news in the UK when we're looking at our Anglophile allies. Farage, we've been seeing the reform. The Brexit guys have been doing better in the local elections there. So I don't know. We'll monitor that. Bill, do you have any other final topics for us? Anything else that struck you over the weekend?
Gone from Australia to Stephen Miller to all over the waterfront. But no, absolutely. I mean, it is amazing how much. Well, so what are just final point? Yeah. Why would Trump be doing this foolish stuff? I mean, either he wants to do it because he wants to be on Putin's side and Xi's side and not on the Democratic allies in Europe and the Democratic allies in Asia's side. I think that's partly true. Or it's all gone to his head so much, as we were saying at the beginning of our conversation today, that he thinks he can do anything and kind of not pay attention to normal rules of geopolitics or other countries' interests and so forth. And I guess those two would go together, I guess, in a way, right?
I do think we have a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. All right, Bill, Kristol, we'll see you back here next week. And everybody else, check us out tomorrow. Peace.